was reading this book, a romantic comedy on the airplane, and I was just struck by how many woke tropes there were. And what woke tropes are just cliches that have become this form of lecturing in our novels that are just so cringe and so tiresome because they're just like regurgitating slogans, professing an ideology more than telling a story. And so that's why I want to talk about romantic comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. Now, Curtis Sittenfeld, her previous books that she wrote in her 20s and 30s were completely bold, innovative, subversive, really compelling, wonderful literary fiction, really. It was kind of bridging the gap between mainstream and literary because she was so accessible, but so poignant and so brilliant in her prose. And so I expected that this would be following suit, but then kind of having just a little more bulk to a romantic comedy. But actually, it was a huge disappointment, and it kind of made me realize that just because somebody's getting older does not mean they are getting wiser. It was very similar to how the Sex and the City reboot of And Just Like That, that reboot was actually regressive from the original series. It felt like Gen X pandering and resenting Gen Y and Gen Z. And this is what this felt like too, because what this amounted to was a wounded, insecure woman that was ranting about how with her age and her looks, she could not get a younger person, but men in her same station, so to speak, her words, could get a younger, hotter person. And yes, that's a common thing that we see, but it doesn't mean it's a story. A rant is not a story. A didactic lecture is not a story. But let's dive into this book about why it is full of woke tropes and why that actually kills all hope of this being compelling and readable. So first of all, it has a wonderful premise. It has the premise of SNL writer, although it's not SNL in this, it's called Night Owls, but it's a sketch comedy writer who is basically falling in love with a musical guest that's on SNL. But it's so, we're so pounded and marinating in woke tropes that we actually can't really get a sense of these characters. And so let's talk about it. So this character, as I said, is fixated on how she, with her looks and age, cannot get a younger person or a person hotter than her, above her station, so to speak. And so she pitches a sketch to SNL about this quandary where a man gets arrested for dating a younger woman. And it doesn't really, it's not funny when you read it, and actually the narrator of this is not funny, but she works as sketch comedy. So that's the first problem. It's really like somebody that's wanting to cosplay as Tina Fey, and as if Tina Fey wanted to be with Harry Styles. So that's what it feels like, is her fantasy. But then let's talk about the woke tropes that it inhibit it. One of them is that we create a men are useless argument. That's a woke trope. Men are by default useless. That's always, and they're a constant source of strife and superiority. So all of her sketches are anti-men. So her first sketch that she pitches is what I talked about, and what she really focuses on this whole book is what she considers the double standard of men getting above their station and women can't have that same, they can't get a young hot guy, which for one, I see hot actors with ugly, ditzy women all the time. So her experience, she's almost letting her assumptions and her insecurity then project into reality, where then she sees this all the time. But it is a common double standard, but to make the first 80 pages of a book about it, the second sketch that she pitches for SNL is equally unfunny. It is about a man judge at a competition like American Idol using more words to tell a woman that she's talking too much, and then the irony is that he's talking a lot about how she's not talking. That's her pitch for a sketch. I don't think that has legs. And then the third pitch is having, this is like a little dig at the guy she actually likes, to act kind of like she's so above cheesiness, but it's a cheese sketch about equating different types of cheese with cheesy lyrics of this guy she likes, the musical guest. So what do all these sketches have in common? They're all belittling men, and they're all perpetuating this war between the sexes that, you know, sometimes a sketch has to do that. Sometimes a sketch, it's necessary to kind of have that commentary, but they're all so forced, and they're just kind of didactic lectures. They're that kind of rantish. They're not really making a point in a satirical or parody way that is effective. Like, to me, she wants to cosplay Tina Fey, but Tina Fey already made these points that she wants to make like 90 leagues above her. Like, Tina Fey's 30 Rock episode of The Bubble is it's brilliant comedy, because it's actually poking fun at this same thing of a very attractive man not knowing that he's bad at tennis because he gets so many compliments, and not knowing that he can order off the menu, like having kind of attractiveness privilege. But she gets that across in a way that's actually using comedic structure, whereas these are a very literary writer cosplaying what it would be like to be an SNL writer, but thinking that if she kind of bolstering herself up with this kind of liberal SJW, well, I'm going to make a difference and make a point. Well, as soon as you start to want to make a difference in comedy, you're didactic and you've lost. You're too dogmatic, and that kills the comedy, because we can all sense this element of somebody being really in a lecture. And we're all guilty of it. I absolutely have that same tendency. It can be when you feel strongly about something, sometimes you can't laugh at it and be playful with it, but you've got to get to that point when you're going to be in comedy. So another woke trope, besides the constantly the men are useless and let's pit men and women against each other, another woke trope is that we get the constant assertion that she is smart and better, but we don't really see it. In fact, we really see I see somebody with a junior high wound that's just, it's welting. It's just, it's been festering, and then it comes out in middle age, and it's just not a good look. So, because she's so focused on she makes, for instance, the hot women that are dating the ugly guys, she always makes them like hot models that are bimbos, and anything that they make a comment on is just, it's very flat. Like, she makes it like, oh, I felt so insecure, I almost ate a donut, and little things like making fun of how they like astrology, and not realizing that actually astrology is it's not just a ditz thing. So she has she doesn't know what she doesn't know, and so she's having this whole assumption about Gen Y and Gen Z that actually just shows her bitterness. It shows her age. Like, whenever you see somebody criticizing the younger generations, they're actually really caught up in their insecurity about aging, I think, and so it's not a good look. So the first part of this book is her working at SNL, pitching horrible sketches, and liking this guy, but then having a sense of superiority over him, like, oh, he's so cheesy, I'm so much smarter, but then having the sense of inferiority in regard to, oh no, why would he ever choose me? My looks are bad. Which, someone shows both superiority and inferiority, it's kind of a power play, because they're using both the pity for what's beneath, and then they're using the like superiority of, oh, I know so much. And it's a really annoying combination, so cringe. But then we get into even more, we start with that kind of woke trope of complete assumptions and men are useless. And then we get into, this turns out this book takes place during 2020. So then we revert to emails, just email exchanges of them being like, when did you lose your virginity? What's your favorite color? Are you protesting with BLM? Oh, of course, so of course. And then just virtue signaling to, because of course, like we had to establish that with this character, when she was having just a casual sex partner, because she's an empowered woman, that's what an empowered woman does in these types of books. And then he used the word snowflake, and that made her think, oh, he uses that word? Oh, he's bad. He's bad. He's not saying the correct script. Because it's not so much that people even have to adhere to the actual liberal ideology in these books. It's just they have to use the right script. So if somebody uses the term snowflake, which has other meanings before the political world, then they're, they might have an inkling of they might even be moderate. They might be right wing. So anyway, it's that stench, that the liberal media creates of, we've got to be on board with all of these things, or you're out. You're evil. So then it goes into this COVID virtue signaling, which of course I don't get a sense of these two people as humans connecting. I get a sense of so many didactic, dogmatic lectures that just say, I'm a good person, I'm superior, if only I were prettier. That's basically what this book says over and over again. And it's called romantic comedy, and she kind of sneers at romantic comedies, but it's like, well, actually there's a lot of, quote, cheesy romantic comedies that have far better comedic structure and better characterization than this. So be careful what you're making fun of, because she acts like, oh, she wants to have characters that believe in something and are smart. It's like, well, that's fine. We all do. But then show it. Don't just tell us that they're smart. Don't just lecture us, and have respect for the form, because when you dare make fun of a romantic comedy and write a book called Romantic Comedy that's not a romantic comedy, that's not romantic or comedic, then you are in trouble. Because I love Curtis Sittenfeld, but I think she's kind of caught up in her wound it's kind of festered as she's aging, and I just think that, carrying on with this resentment is not bringing out the best in her, because she's a wonderful storyteller. But sometimes as you age, you actually are trying to get more group approval, you're trying to get more social reward. You're actually more of a people pleaser, because when you first are expressing yourself and you're young, you're actually trying to say something because you're still individualistic, and now we're getting so tribal. And that's what woke tropes is about. It's about looking at what's happening to our art with this ideological slant that we always work through. Because tropes are elements that become cliche, and when our art becomes cliche, our storytelling becomes flat. And so it's important to call out woke tropes, because otherwise we're just living in an ideological, propagandized art. So we don't want to live there. So don't read this book.